You know the feeling, right? Like you have a major decision to make, and your immediate instinct, the instinct that society has basically drilled into you, is to just gather more data.
Oh, absolutely. More data, more
Right.
research.
You open up like 20 different browser tabs, you draft up this massive pro and con list, you're scrubbing through hundreds of user reviews, reading expert opinions, and just desperately trying to logic your way into the perfect, unassailable choice.
Yeah, and it is entirely exhausting.
It really is. But, I mean, what if all that rational thinking, all that endless, meticulous research you're doing is actually the exact mechanism leading you astray?
Well, it challenges the very foundation of how we operate today. I mean, we are profoundly conditioned to believe that more information automatically equals better, safer decisions, you know?
Right, totally.
We treat rationality and data collection as the ultimate gold standard for navigating life. Like, under the assumption that if we just gather enough facts, the right path will just sort of reveal itself.
Which makes sense on paper.
Sure, but there is a highly compelling argument to be made that our modern obsession with data is actually blinding us to a much more fundamental and potentially much more accurate way of understanding the world around us.
And that really is the mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a truly fascinating and honestly quite provocative essay written in December 2020 by Swiffing, and it's titled Spiritual Perception is Safer Than Rational Analysis.
It's a great piece.
Getting into this source was just a wild experience because it completely flips the script on our relationship with information overload.
Yeah.
It touches on philosophy, history, and the absolute limits of human knowledge to propose this radical alternative for how you and I should actually be making decisions.
It really demands that we reconsider the very tools we use to perceive reality. I mean, it's not just offering a new productivity hack or something.
Right.
It is asking us to recognize that we might be actively ignoring a massive, vital part of the human experience simply because we can't, like, measure it on a spreadsheet or verify it in a laboratory.
Okay, so let's unpack how the essay actually builds this argument. Because it starts by redefining human biology, or at least our functional perception of it.
Yeah.
Um, we all learned the basics in grade school. Right?
Here are the five physical senses.
Exactly. Visual, auditory, gustatory, olfactory, tactile. Sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. But the core concept presented here is that humans actually possess a sixth sense.
Yeah.
The essay calls it spiritual perception, or the Chinese term is lingzhu.
And to really understand why this Lingju is necessary, we have to look at how the source divides reality itself. Because the essay posits that reality is split into two entirely distinct realms.
The realms, okay.
Right. So on one side, you have the material world. This is the physical realm of, tables, chairs, sound waves, chemical reactions. But on the other side, you have what is termed the anti-material or non-material world.
And those five physical senses we just listed, they're strictly, like 100%, for perceiving the material world.
Right, exactly.
Your eyes can see the traffic light turn red. Your hands feel the texture of your steering wheel. Your nose smells the coffee. But that is where their jurisdiction definitively ends.
They hit a wall.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the anti-material world, the essay argues those five senses are just completely, utterly useless.
And that boundary is the crucial starting point here. The anti-material world, according to this framework, can only be perceived through spiritual perception. I mean, you can't see it under a microscope, you can't hear it with a microphone, and you certainly can't touch it.
Right.
It's just an entirely different frequency of reality requiring an entirely different sensory organ to intercept it.
And the examples the text gives of what actually lives in this anti-material world, it really forces you to pause.
Yeah.
Because we are not just talking about abstract moods or vague vibes here.
Oh, no, it gets very specific.
Yeah. The essay explicitly categorizes things like the past and the future as existing in the anti-material realm. It includes heaven and hell. It lists the physiological fields of other people, their hidden inner thoughts, and their underlying motives.
Which is huge.
Right. It even includes the concept of future fortune or misfortune. I mean, when you think about it, you literally cannot smell the future. You can't physically touch someone's hidden agenda.
No, you can't. Which brings us to the core friction of modern life, really. Because we can't use our five physical senses to interact with those phenomena, our culture tends to either dismiss them entirely or try to forcefully cram them into a framework of rational analysis.
Which never works out well.
No, it doesn't. We try to use historical data and logic to predict future outcomes, or we analyze behavioral psychology to deduce someone else's inner motives. The fundamental argument here is that we're using the wrong tools for the job. We're applying a material world mechanism to an anti-material world problem.
Okay, here's an analogy that really helped me wrap my head around this.
Mm.
Think about your computer setup.
Okay.
Your 5 physical senses are basically the standard wired hardware, like the keyboard, the mouse, the monitor. And they are incredibly good at interacting with whatever is physically plugged into the machine right in front of you.
Makes sense.
But this spiritual perception, this Lingju, is your Wi-Fi receiver. It's the only component in your system capable of picking up on all the invisible data streams floating all around us in the air.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, so if you try to download a website using just your keyboard, I mean, you can smash those keys all day long, but nothing is going to happen. You need the Wi-Fi receiver to connect to that invisible network.
Right. Consider the implications of that metaphor. The hardware is absolutely necessary for manipulating the immediate physical environment, sure, but it leaves you completely isolated from the broader network if you don't have that receiver.
Exactly.
And modern technology just conditions us to trust only the keyboard. We like the tactile feedback, right? We like the illusion of control, which leads directly to a major turning point in the essay's philosophy.
Yeah.
If we possess this highly advanced, built-in Wi-Fi receiver specifically designed to understand things like future fortune or hidden motives, why is our default setting always to bang away on the keyboard of logic?
Because the keyboard feels safe. I mean, we love feeling like we are in control of the inputs, even if the outputs are consistently wrong. And this is exactly where the source delivers just a blistering critique of rational analysis.
It really does. The essay labels rational analysis as highly unreliable. And to understand why, we have to trace logic back to its roots. I mean, rational analysis relies entirely on existing knowledge, right? You can't logic your way through a problem without a foundational data set.
Right, you need something to work with.
Exactly. But where does that data set come from? It's built entirely from our life experiences, from the teachings of predecessors, from books, and ultimately from the data gathered by our 5 physical senses.
All the inputs that are strictly limited to the material world.
Precisely. Because logic draws exclusively from this materially limited, backward-looking pool of knowledge, the essay argues that historical experience can never actually solve current and future dilemmas.
Because it's a completely different realm.
Yeah, we are perpetually trying to use a database of past physical world events to navigate future anti-material world problems. The premise itself is mismatched.
And the essay suggests the problem is even deeper than just a mismatch. Because that historical database we rely on is often fundamentally corrupted. Like, the text brings up a highly specific, very potent historical example.
Right, the emperors.
Yeah, it references the legendary ancient Chinese emperors Yao, Shun, and Yu. Now, for context, these are monumental figures in Chinese history, widely revered for the peaceful, virtuous abdication and transfer of power. They are basically held up as the ultimate benchmark for moral leadership.
Yeah, they form a foundational pillar of historical political philosophy. I mean, the stories of their reign are treated as absolute, verified data points of human virtue.
Right. But the essay asks us to hit the brakes. It suggests that this legendary, highly praised historical event might look absolutely nothing like the official historical record captured by McKean in his massive work, The Records of the Grand Historian.
Right.
The source essentially argues that this widely accepted historical truth might be heavily distorted, stitched together from tiny, unreliable clues, or perhaps even completely fabricated.
Which is a bold claim.
It is. And okay, I have to stop here and push back on this because I genuinely struggle with this leak. Like, throwing out logic and questioning the absolute truth of history is one thing, but are we saying we just assume every book, every historical record, and every piece of data is completely fake?
It's a fair question.
Because if I don't use historical data to recognize patterns, I'm just flying blind, you know? I use history so I don't repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah.
So how can we justify tossing the whole concept of rational analysis out the window just because some history might be distorted?
Right. It's a deeply uncomfortable proposition for anyone who values critical thinking. But the essay isn't necessarily demanding you believe every single fact ever recorded is a deliberate lie. Instead, it's highlighting a devastating law of logical deduction. If your foundational premise is built on flawed, distorted, or heavily romanticized historical experience, any logical conclusion you draw from that premise is guaranteed to be flawed.
So it's like garbage in, garbage out, but on a civilizational scale.
Exactly. Think about it this way. If Sumakin's history of Yao, Shun, and Yu is actually a romanticized fabrication, and a scholar spends their entire life building a rigorous political philosophy on top of it, using flawless, airtight logic, that final philosophy is still functionally useless.
Because the foundation was made of sand.
Yes. The logic itself might be internally consistent, but because it's anchored to a false premise, it leads you away from reality. The essay warns that logic built on a bad foundation is actively dangerous because it gives you a false sense of absolute security.
Oh, I see.
You think you're safe because you did the math, when in reality the numbers were wrong from the very start.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. The sheer arrogance of assuming our historical data set is perfectly accurate is what gets us into trouble. But, I mean, this creates a massive practical problem for you and me.
How so?
Well, if we accept this premise that logic is a trap because the data is corrupted, and that we can't trust reviews, historical precedents, or rational analysis, how are we supposed to evaluate anything? Like, if I'm trying to decide what to read, and I can't trust the Amazon reviews or the book's jacket copy, what do I do?
Well, the essay anticipates this exact dilemma, and it provides a remarkably specific physical testing method. It's a technique designed to completely bypass the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain obsessed with rationalization, and activate that spiritual perception directly.
And this method is fascinating because it's so incredibly physical. The text provides a literal test to perform before you commit to reading a book.
Yeah, the rolling test.
Right. The instructions are super clear. Do not trust other people's recommendations, and do not trust the introductions. They are inherently unreliable. Instead, you are supposed to take the physical book, roll it up into a cylinder, and point the rolled center directly at the palm of your hand.
I know it sounds unusual to the modern ear, but notice the mechanics of what's happening here. By rolling the book, you're creating a sort of focal point, right? An antenna directing the energy of the object toward a highly sensitive part of your body.
And the somatic response you are looking for is completely binary. According to the source, if you point the rolled book at your palm and you feel a warm breeze or this warm, comfortable energy, then that book is valuable and you should read it.
Right.
But if you feel a cool breeze on your palm, the book is not just a waste of time, it is potentially harmful to you.
And the reasoning behind the somatic test anchors it perfectly to the broader philosophy of the two realms. I mean, why the palm instead of the brain? Because other people's recommendations, their logical, well-articulated arguments for why a book is a masterpiece, might easily deceive your intellect. They might have hidden agendas, or they might just be operating from their own flawed baselines of knowledge.
Makes sense.
Your logical brain can be talked into reading something toxic, but your palm will never lie to you. The physical body acts as a direct, uncorrupted conduit for your Lingju, giving you an instant read on the anti-material value of the object.
So you're just outsourcing the decision-making process away from the tangled mess of logic and handing it over to pure physical intuition.
Exactly.
And the source does not stop at analog objects like books. It brings this exact philosophy into our digital lives, specifically focusing on how we interact with new people. It introduces what we can basically call the WeChat test.
Right, applying this ancient concept of spiritual perception directly to the anxiety of modern social media and digital communication.
Yes. Think about how exhausting digital networking is. You get a request on LinkedIn, a message on a dating app, or someone adds you on WeChat. And the immediate rational instinct is to launch a full investigation.
Oh, of course.
You look at their mutual friends, you analyze their employment history, you overthink the specific emoji they used, and you try to deduce their entire personality from a bio.
We try to construct a material world profile to predict an anti-material world interaction.
Exactly the trap. But the essay says to stop all of that immediately. According to the text, when someone adds you, their very first message, a small picture they send, a short video, or even a single shared article contains their entire essence.
Yeah, all of it.
All of their information, their motives, and their character are fully encoded in that very first digital interaction.
The data is there, but you can't access it through a logical audit of their profile. You have to be open to perceiving it through that immediate spark of spiritual perception.
And this is where the advice becomes so actionable. Because the source dictates that you must rely entirely on that instantaneous, unlogicked feeling. Like if you look at that first message and you immediately feel comfortable, if it brings a sense of refreshment or ease, the text says this person is safe to associate with.
Right.
But, and this is the crucial part, if that very first vibe feels uncomfortable or murky, you must avoid them immediately. You don't try to talk yourself out of the murky feeling.
No.
You don't give them the benefit of the doubt because they went to a good school or have impressive mutual friends. You trust the murkiness.
Which forces us to ask the inevitable question, right? What mechanically happens when we ignore that initial gut feeling?
Oh, Because we all do it.
Exactly. We feel the cold breeze from a situation, or we get that deeply murky feeling from a new acquaintance, but the polite, rational part of our brain just overrides it. We logic our way into the interaction anyway because it makes sense on paper.
I can definitively say from personal experience, it almost always ends in a disaster. I mean, I have spent months trying to rationalize toxic business partnerships just because the initial spreadsheet looked profitable, completely ignoring the pit in my stomach on day one. How does the essay explain why that always backfires?
Well, the author details the specific psychological trap of overthinking. When you interact with someone or something for too long after ignoring that initial warning signal, you inevitably abandon your spiritual perception altogether. You completely lose the Wi-Fi signal.
Wow.
And in its absence, you fall back into the comfortable, culturally approved habit of rational analysis. You start finding logical reasons to justify their bad behavior. You start making excuses based on their past trauma or their potential.
So you were desperately banging on the keyboard to fix a network connection error.
Yes. And the more you type, the worse the error gets. The essay uses a profound piece of classical poetry to perfectly encapsulate the absolute trap of rationalizing against your intuition.
What's the quote?
The quote is, "Cut it, it doesn't break. Untangle it, it remains a mess. It's a sorrow, a different kind of flavor in the heart."
Untangle it, it remains a mess.
Yeah.
That is such a visceral description of cognitive dissonance. When you're trapped in a bad relationship or a failing project that you logicked your way into, you keep trying to use more logic to untangle the problem.
Right.
But logic can't solve a problem that exists in the anti-material realm. The more you analyze the mess, the tighter the knots get.
Because the mess itself is the direct result of abandoning your lingview. The sorrow described in the poem is the internal friction of your body knowing a truth that your brain refuses to accept.
Yeah.
And the scale at which the essay applies this concept is just staggering. I mean, we've been talking about judging books and evaluating social media messages, but the text explicitly claims this intuitive testing method is universally applicable.
Yeah, it really broadens the scope. The essay impartially lays out that this exact same spiritual perception should be used to evaluate complex theories. It claims we should use it to judge the validity of entire religions.
Which is huge.
Right. It suggests evaluating political parties, the trajectory of nations, and the unfolding of the future itself through this lens.
It's proposing a unified theory of navigation, essentially. Whether it's a global political movement or a direct message on an app, the filter remains identical. The immediate, intuitive spark of spiritual perception is endlessly more reliable than historical analysis or rigorous logical debate.
Which leads us to the ultimate, incredibly blunt piece of advice that really caps off the entire essay. After dismantling our reliance on history, dividing reality into two realms, and warning us about the tangled mess of rationalization, the text distills its philosophy into a simple directive.
And what is that?
Read fewer trash books and listen to less trash talk.
It's brilliant. It sounds like simple time management advice on the surface, but if we connect this to the intricate mechanics we've just discussed, the implications are much more severe. The author isn't just saying, don't waste your weekend on a bad novel. There's a profound physiological and spiritual consequence being outlined here. The ultimate takeaway is that absorbing too much messy, chaotic knowledge, even if it is factually true in the material world, actively dulls your spiritual perception.
So by constantly forcing data through the system, you are literally degrading the sensitivity of your own antenna.
That is the fundamental danger. Every time we force ourselves to consume useless data out of a sense of obligation, or every time we sit through trash talk, or engage in endless, circular, rational analysis of flawed historical information, we are eroding our lingju.
Yeah.
In our desperate modern quest to be considered well-informed, scrolling through endless news feeds, reading every hot take, knowing all the disconnected facts, we might actually be blinding our most accurate, most vital sense. We fill our internal landscape with so much static that we can no longer feel the subtle difference between a warm and a cold breeze.
The very act of trying to be hyper-intelligent is making us perceptually numb. That's a sobering realization.
It really is.
So what does this all mean for you as you go about your day? I mean, think about the decisions you are facing right now, the tabs you have open on your computer, the messages sitting unread on your phone.
Yeah, we all have them.
How many times have you pushed down a murky feeling from a situation because you couldn't instantly justify it with logic? How many times have you ignored the cold breeze, forced yourself to untangle the mess, and deeply regretted it later? True clarity might not come from endlessly analyzing the data on your screen. It might come from stepping back, dropping the logic, and quietly feeling the energy of the situation.
Which leaves us with a lingering, vital question to consider. If our spiritual perception, our internal Wi Fi receiver, is constantly being damaged and dulled by the chaotic trash data of modern life, what is the necessary diet to sharpen it again?
Oh, that's a great point.
Right. Because we are currently seeing a massive cultural movement toward digital detoxes, with people fleeing social media, going off the grid, and just abandoning their smartphones. Could it be that our growing, desperate urge to disconnect isn't just about resting our eyes or reducing screen time?
Yeah.
Perhaps it is a profound, entirely subconscious attempt by our minds to regain this lost sixth sense.
A subconscious drive to finally clean the antenna and reestablish the connection. It certainly gives a whole new weight to the idea of putting your phone on airplane mode. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.